Welcome to another edition of the Best Business Minds, where we interview business leaders and academics that write thought-provoking books. I'm Marc Kramer, a serial entrepreneur who consults with family businesses and entrepreneurs. Today, we have Dr. Andrew Temte, President of Corporate Learning at Kaplan North America and author of Balancing Act, Teach, Coach, and Mentor and Inspire. Andy, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Well, thank you for joining us today. Before we get started about the book, can you please tell us about your background? Especially, I thought this was interesting. You were an aspiring rock star and what you learned from that experience.
Yeah, well, telling the story might take the whole show, but I'll try to be brief. As you mentioned, when I was a young man, I'm actually a high school dropout, and left high school in the 11th grade when I realized that I wanted to be a rock star, and there was not much more for me to do in high school other than take shop and gym classes. So I left high school in the 11th grade. I got my GED and then started touring in the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, et cetera. And that journey taught me a lot about the business world specifically, and how my aspirations to be a rock star and to go into music, I totally missed, and did not have the mentorship around me to say, Andy, this is not about you being on stage performing. That's an important part, but the bigger part of it is running, marketing and running an effective business, and that's what we missed there. So gave up on the music at age 21. Went right back to school. Spent the next 9 years going from undergrad to master's, and then ultimately a PhD in finance. And like you, a serial entrepreneur, by the time I was exiting PhD, the business that we started with my mentor Carl Swazer had already taken off. And so instead of entering academe as a finance professor, decided to train financial analysts how to pass the Chartered Financial Analyst exams. And then in 1999, we sold that business to Kaplan, and I've done all sorts of. I've had a very rich career at Kaplan over the last almost 22 years. It's been a wonderful ride. I've had all sorts of opportunities to lead higher education institutions, professional education institutions, and right now I'm really focused on work readiness, upskilling and reskilling of the global population.
So why did you write this particular book? And it was a super interesting book, especially your own background and all the things you personally talked about, your own experiences and the trail that you took. So why did you write this book?
Yeah, I started writing the stories back in 2017. I knew that I had something to say to the market, and there would be lessons that and journeys that I've taken that were less than productive, that I could potentially save others from walking down those same roads, or at least help minimize waste and effort by helping guide individuals through these stories. The original I always knew that I wanted to turn those stories into a book, and the original concept was, I've for most of my career I've been a mid-level senior executive within corporate America, so not quite at the top of a mid-size or large organization, but just below that top layer. and there are a lot of people that fit in that category. And so it was going to be the tongue firmly in cheek, tales of a mid-level senior executive was going to be the theme.
Yeah.
And what
All
I
right.
ended up with was
I'm not gonna watch this.
Oh, okay.
I found that balance was one of the keys to the book.
Yeah, and you talk about that throughout the book. I like the opening of your book and wanted to ask you to explain what you wrote. Success without balance is often more disastrous than failure with balance.
Yeah, that's a quote that takes a couple of times through to really get at the subtext that's there. I would I have had a lot of success in my career, and I was unbalanced through many of those episodes during my life, and being unbalanced and having that success then provides the impetus to do more of that. But what I wasn't doing was really focusing on the whole picture. I was maniacally focused on one thing. I was missing many other parts of my life, the nuances and the undertones of what my success and the impact that was having on those around me. So yes, I was having a great deal of success, but I was leading both myself and my family to some real tipping points that were on the negative side of the equation. So I would rather be balanced, fail, learn from that, grow, and move on to the next thing than be wildly unbalanced, have success, and be a bull in a china shop, and basically ruin relationships, and not not really be the man, the father, the leader that I need to be for those around me.
So what's the message to hard-charging Super A personalities here about getting balance and managing both family and your insatiable desire to be the very best in your field and to ascend to the C-suite?
Yeah, the hard charging type A's that are focused, really focused on one thing. At least in my experience, I have found that divorce rates are higher for those individuals. And ultimately, when you reach that ideal, that pinnacle that you've painted for yourself in your mind, how satisfying is it really once you've reached that plateau? Because there's always another plateau that you're going to go strive for. And the whole concept of striking balance is to weave a bit more of the narrative that once you've achieved so much in your life, is it really worth the incremental effort to continue to be that hard charger, or to open yourself up to being multidimensional, to ensuring that you're focusing on your family and those around you. And most importantly, that shift came for me where I realized a little too late in my career that it was less about me and more about the people that were around me, and building them up and ensuring their success at the same time that I was driving for mine.
Yeah, you wrote about unapproachable, uncaring, unbalanced creates an epidemic of disillusionment with the lower ranks of their organizations. I think we kind of just lived through that with the type of leader we just recently had in the White House. You have 70 million people, some very smart and many are good managers. Why do you think so many people support this type of leader?
So we're not going to get political here.
No.
But
Yeah, the management style, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, the management style is really unsustainable through time. What I've found, I'll just speak about myself and my experiences because that's what I know and what I see around me. But leaders that take that hard charging, do as I say, thou shalt kind of a style. Their turnover rates are tend to be higher. The cost of doing business is higher, and the data is and the research is starting to really show that you don't get the diversity of the minds that are around you. And I really made that mistake earlier in my career, trying to kind of fit out my leadership team with people that looked more like me and were and thought like me, and yeah, that got us to play that, that helped with speed, but that really didn't help with a rich, sustainable business environment where constructive conflict is really part of the equation. And it's okay to challenge a leader, have difficult conversations. The leader opens their ears and their minds to what's possible, and you get much more rich set of outcomes from that kind of environment versus the thou shalt and you're fired kind of an environment.
So what is the profile of an effective leader? Does it differ from being a successful manager? And I ask this because I'm thinking about Steve Jobs as the effective leader and Tim Cook as the successful manager. So what does the profile of the effective leader look like? Because it doesn't necessarily mean he can actually manage people.
Yeah, this concept of the personality that leads the business, that's very important, because in many cases, not all, but in many cases, a business centers around a strong personality, and that's okay for a period of time, but for the long-term sustainability of the business, it's important to recognize that some depersonalization needs to occur. So having that, gregarious, outgoing, that larger than life kind of great man, great woman type of a personality, that's awesome. But a great manager, somebody that understands planning, understands goal setting, understands how to cascade goals up, down, and through the organization, understands how roles and responsibilities are set, and builds and has a keen eye toward building organizational trust. That's a balancing act that exists within those companies that have those that are driven by those large personalities, and the ones that get it right have that proper balance, and the gregarious leader that's out in front understands that balance.
How important has emotional intelligence become for today's leaders? Because I think leadership has changed a lot over the last 25 plus years. So how important is emotional intelligence become for today's leaders? You even hear it in college sports, both in football, basketball, and everything.
Yeah, more and more employees, the concept of bringing one's whole self into the world of work, this links up directly with diversity and inclusion. And I'm not just talking about color here. I'm talking about diversity of opinion, mindset, cultural background, etc. Again, the research is showing that you get more rich outcomes from those diverse experiences versus that very directive setting. So if if it is the case, which I believe that it is, that you get better outcomes in the long run from having more diverse teams, more diverse backgrounds, being inclusive, the leader in that scenario needs open ears. They need an open mind. They need to be able to be empathetic to the needs of their team members, and I'm not necessarily a fan of this phrase, but meet their people where they're at, and understand that people are the company's most valuable asset. Once a leader makes that connection, that people are your most valuable asset, and okay, my people, everybody's got their blank, everybody's got their, everybody's in a different place on any given day, and a leader that assumes that everybody is just coin operated cog in a big wheel, you're not getting the best out of that team. So empathy, communication, emotional, those are all wrapped up into that emotional intelligence category.
Yeah, I think it's so changed. Just like I love watching sports, but the Bobby Knight way of managing and coaching players doesn't work anymore, and they all had to change. Even great coaches like Nick Saban have had to adjust with the times and what the expectations are. One of the questions from the audience is, I wonder if Andrew has an opinion on how much of our goals are driven by personal ambition, as in self-actualization, Maslow's hierarchy, or actually ego-driven, being competitive and just achieving to just beat the rest or prove others wrong? And does underlying motives play a part in how a manager performs?
Wow, there was a lot there.
There's a whole hour.
Yeah, right. That is, in the middle of the organization. Let's talk about the middle of the organization. You get leaders and managers within the middle of the organization that are ego driven, are all about themselves. The way I would couch my answer to this is, we need to move much more toward leadership being associated with stewardship of the business, and much less about the individual personality. And so I've lived this over and over again in my career, where I've got a great idea. I think it's all about me. I want to go get investment for that idea. And the company says, okay, Andy, here's your investment for that. And this is all on you. What that environment does is it creates an us versus them within the company. And whenever, some level of internal competition is certainly good, but at exactly the same time, we've got to recognize that within a corporate structure, we're all in this together. Again, people are your most valuable asset. And as a leader who's thinking about both the short term and the long term, if you put on a stewardship hat and a stewardship mindset, all of a sudden the lens starts to change about what my role is in this company. And it's then less about me and more about the success of the whole and the success of the business that I work for. And if I get all that right, then my personal success follows, versus the other way around, where I'm worried more about my personal success than I am about the collective and the people that are around me.
So you write about waiting to give feedback once a year isn't very effective practice. What do you suggest, and how should that work?
Yeah, so the subtitle of my book is Teach, Coach, Mentor, Inspire. And the thing that many managers either get wrong, ignore, or don't know how to do well is the second word in that list, which is coach. I believe strongly that managers should be coaching their people throughout the year, and that the annual performance review should frankly die within most organizations. We should have continual feedback, continual coaching, two-way feedback between the manager and the employee. Because if you think about the annual performance reviews that you've been through as the folks in the audience today, most of those annual performance reviews are fear-based and not development based. It's very, very difficult to, on an annual basis, get together, and it's the only time you have this conversation. The employee is scared to death. The manager doesn't do these things very, very often. They only do them once a year, so the manager is not very good at them either. And so the whole product is bad and becomes almost a compliance exercise. We need to move the annual performance review away from compliance and toward continual coaching, continual development that's linked to the goals of the business and the educational objectives of both the team, the employee, so that we're continually developing individuals to continually upskill them throughout their career.
At Kaplan, do you teach promising managers how to coach, not just manage the situation, but how to maximize the potential of the people around them?
Yeah, like most organizations, that answer is it depends. It depends on the business unit. It depends on the geography. At Kaplan, we're a truly global business with operations in many different countries. I would certainly like to see more consistency of application there throughout Kaplan, but this is from my experience a systemic issue across many organizations, and one of the reasons why coaching platforms, and Kaplan has one in full disclosure, but coaching platforms that utilize tools like the one that we're using today and democratizing coaching and making it available to more individuals in the organization and not just the elite or the C-suite or your high potentials and high performers. That's a really encouraging trend that we're seeing.
How, as you write in the book, do you read people by looking them in the eye?
Yeah, the eyes, the old saying, the eyes are the window to the soul.
Yeah.
It's very easy to make assumptions about people based on their appearance, and so this, evaluating people through what's going on in their eyes is very difficult. But what I look for is a very intangible ingredient in an individual, and I characterize that as the light that shines in their eyes. And when I'm having a conversation with somebody, I need to have. You can't do this just once. This doesn't come in one interaction, but that if you see somebody over and over again and you consistently see this light, this spark in their eyes, it's almost assuredly that they're not performing for you as in some sort of theatrical performance, but there's something genuine and authentic there. So a lot of people write about the concept of authenticity. I feel very strongly that the authenticity of an individual comes to you through that light that's in their eyes.
I've heard people often say that they can read somebody by their eyes, and I think also FBI agents and other law enforcement are taught to do that same thing. How do you motivate a talented person with no drive? I mean, I think a lot of people, especially parents, see that where they have a child that has all kinds of talent, but they seem really unmotivated and aren't willing to embrace what they have and maximize it. And I'm sure you see that with people that you end up hiring and think that they could be so much more. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I think this is a lot of the part of the two-way street, which is the manager and employee relationship, meeting individuals where they're at. And yes, I hired you for this particular job, but to work with individuals on what really in their job description, what really motivates, what really trips their trigger, and gets them motivated. So diversity of experience, and as a manager, watching out for those signs that that an individual is just caught in they're wrong. They're the wrong person. They're either wrong person, right role, or some combination of the above. I talk about multidimensionalism a lot, and being more than focusing on just one thing, and having folks try and expand their repertoire, shall we say, is a very important thing. And if you expand your repertoire as an employee and work as a manager to expand the repertoire of your people, you're going to find those rushing streams that your people really start to connect with. And sometimes you have to say goodbye, do a kindness to folks who do not connect with the work, the mission, the vision, the purpose of your business, but to explore and to help individuals find those rushing streams that really do get them motivated.
And the two-way street is they've got to be wanting to do it, right?
Yeah, there has to be some. I find that the vast majority of human beings have that ability to find drive. It might but the word of caution that I would give to leaders out there is that that person's definition of drive is not necessarily your definition of drive. And that's where having those emotional intelligence skills, the situational awareness, to be able to see that, where your definition and their definition are not congruent with one another. Early in my son's career, I had that. I was so frustrated because my definition of drive and motivation was different than his.
Yeah, and you have to recognize that, especially with our kids. How was the transition? Because we have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to the show. How was the transition from entrepreneur to working for a large company, and why did you do it? And it seems to me that it's been very successful because you've been there 22 years.
Yeah, when we sold the company in November 22nd, 1999, you never forget the day that you sell your company, or your probably your first company. Mark, you've probably sold many companies as a serial entrepreneur, but I remember that date specifically, and I expected to come on board. My business partner wanted to retire at the time, and I was going to take over the business for Kaplan. Kaplan knew nothing about the chartered financial analyst education space, so I was going to spend a couple of years getting things set and settled, and then move on to something else. What I found within the environment of Kaplan, especially in the mid 2000s and leading up and through the Great Recession, was an environment of great dynamism and agility, and a tapestry and a framework that allowed me to build new skill, to test and to iterate as if I was an entrepreneur doing it, in a small team environment from the outside. So I got that rush, if you will, of building and testing and finding that success, seeing that failure, learning from it, growing from that failure within this global company called Kaplan. So I decided to stay and really enjoyed the ride. But within Kaplan, I've probably had 5 or 6 different careers during what some people would consider 5 or 6 careers during that 22-year span.
I thought this was interesting. You mentioned the Gallup poll said that only 13% of employees are engaged in their work. Disengaged employees cost 34% of an employee's salary. Why is that, and how can companies change that? I think it's been an ongoing struggle for quite some time.
Yeah, disengagement, and I start the book off with my personal story, but quickly in part 1 move into the damage that disengagement is causing businesses around the world. And I tell a couple of stories of how I've seen disengagement evidence itself in the workplace. And we all have in large businesses, and even in some mid-sized businesses, you have the annual engagement survey where you're trying to gauge the relative level of engagement of the business. Most HR teams focus their attention on what they call the movable middle, those that are kind of indifferent, sitting in that big pool in the middle, that don't score high, but also don't score super low either. And yeah, those people many of them are just punching the clock. They haven't quite connected with the purpose and the vision of the organization. Maybe they've got a poor manager and they just need a bit more mentorship and TLC, more coaching to grow. But there's a thin red line that exists in most engagement surveys, and those are the actively disengaged in your organization. Those are the people that either hate their manager, they're literally working every day to cross purposes to the organization that they're getting a paycheck from. And those individuals are very damaging to the organization. They're the toxic parts of teams. They hurt and in some cases preclude the development and the growth of trust within the team and within an organization. And a lot of managers kind of ignore that, and HR organizations ignore that red line. And what I point out is that the disengaged within organizations are destroying corporate value and not adding to it in any kind of meaningful way. So it's very, very important to understand that disengagement exists within your organization, and then to work to build everybody up so that set great goals, set great objectives, so that those who are disengaged in the organization show up like blinking red lights, and you can have either critical development conversations to help get them back on the right track, or put performance improvement plans in place to ultimately exit them from your company, because they don't want to be there and you don't want them to be there. So it's best for everybody to identify and move on.
I found that when I've let people go because of that, they were grateful. They just didn't want to pull the plug themselves, and they felt bad about it, but they wanted to go. And when you pulled it, it was a big weight taken off of them.
Yeah,
I always thought that was really interesting. And I found in my own career, I once was CEO of a company, and every day I was hoping the train would come off the track so I wouldn't have to go in. And after 6 months, I found somebody to replace me, and I was the happiest guy not to be running that company. How do you get employees to be receptive and positively act on criticism when they might feel they're being rebuked?
Yeah, well, this goes back to our conversation about emotional intelligence and empathy, and being that, very directive, my way or the highway type of leader. If you're that type of leader where you're very directive, and you as the leader have not developed active listening skills, your people pick up on that right away, and they know that any type of constructive feedback or criticism about the plan, about the business, about the direction of the team, individual workflow, et cetera, that pushback is not going to be met with any kind of receptivity. So you just don't get it, because humans generally abhor conflict. They try to avoid it, and many people avoid it at all costs. So as a leader, the way that you draw that out is by leading by example, and bringing folks into a session where you're promoting that kind of again, constructive feedback. The exercise that I like to take people through is a very simple question, which is, what would you be doing if I wasn't here? If I, the leader, the manager, if you removed me from the equation, what would this team, what would this business be doing? Would you be doing something different? And if you would be doing something different, let's have a conversation about that. Now, it takes a healthier team to be able to engage in that. So there's trust building that needs to occur prior to engaging in that kind of conversation. But I have found in my career that simple question, that simple framework in kind of a half day offsite, a full day offsite can really yield benefit.
And we've been talking about emotional intelligence quite a bit here, but is that something you're born with, or can that be taught and developed?
I feel strongly that it can be taught and developed. There is the id of the individual, the self that we are born with, our base self, that might have a predisposal to more empathy and situational awareness. But I believe this is a skill that can be taught, that can be nurtured. Everything takes practice, and one of the ways that I've done it is I'm brushing my teeth in the morning. I look myself in the eye, and I tell myself, I'm going to really, in my meetings today, really open my ears and really work on those active listening skills. And when I've done that and just focused on active listening, I've found that I'm more open to other positions and opinions. And when I'm quiet and not talking, we have two ears and one mouth for a reason, as the old saying goes. And when you start using them in that proportion, then these other skills, the empathy and the emotional intelligence can really start coming to the fore.
Do you find there's a difference between men and women? And because I always hear, and I've read, that when men hear a problem, they immediately want to go and solve it. Women have a process, and they want to talk about it and talk it through and listen and then discuss. So is there a difference in styles between men and women?
Well, as a guy, that's a very dangerous question for me to even address. So I will almost assuredly get it wrong. But there's, I believe, if we just go back to diversity and inclusion, we know that organizations that are diverse and inclusive to a broad range of thoughts and opinions within their organizations and different perspectives. I call that the lensing effect in the book. You know, what color lenses I wear. You know, recognizing that we all come from different geographies, different cultures, different genders, et cetera, and having open ears and open minds to those. You know, I don't think it's necessarily fair to kind of put folks in one box or another. And once you start doing that and make assumptions that a female is better at X than a guy is, I've almost always gotten myself in trouble by making those broad assumptions. But you know, we do all come to the table with different skills and ability, different perspectives, and embracing and putting our arms around those different perspectives is one of the keys to the future world of work.
So please explain your concern with entropy and why it needs to be fought.
Yeah, I love the word entropy. It's a cool word, but it essentially it's part of the laws of thermodynamics. You know, we're not going to get into a physics conversation here, but entropy is basically the concept that with enough time, every process, every system falls apart. The universe is falling apart. You know, my body is falling apart. Your business is falling apart at any given moment if left to its in its current state. So this concept of entropy is then balanced with continuous improvement. So I like to think of it as a virtuous cycle, that the natural state of things is that everything is falling apart, relationships, teams, whatever you want to talk about. And part of the natural order then, and especially our intelligence as humans, is to be putting those systems back together. And if I go back, even connect back to stewardship, I have an obligation as a human on this planet to recognize that almost from the minute that I'm born, that things are starting to fall apart, and I need to be continuously working to improve them and put them back together so I can be the next best version of myself, the next best version of a team, my family, my place of employment, or the company that I'm running. So if you think about continuous improvement and entropy going together and this virtuous cycle, it can open your mind to looking at the world in a different frame.
No question about it. Can you please explain reskilling revolution and how that will affect businesses' success? I just read about something like that in the Wall Street Journal this morning about matching people's skill sets with the jobs that are available.
Yeah. So I'm really fortunate. I serve on the Skills Consortium for the World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum is one of the largest and most prominent geopolitical organizations. It runs the Davos conference every year and has its fingers on the pulse of many societal issues, climate change, et cetera, et cetera. And skilling and job readiness, job relevance in a world in the fourth industrial revolution, where also a term coined by one of the leaders at World Economic Forum. But in this fourth industrial revolution, what makes this industrial revolution different from the ones that came before it is that we have computers that can think at low cognitive but ever increasing cognitive levels. So humans to keep their relevance in the world of work will have to be adopting new skills, new abilities over the coming decades to maintain that relevance. And back in 2018, World Economic Forum started their research on this topic and identified that by early 2030, we need to reskill, not upskill, reskill up to 1 billion people. 1/8 of the global population will need to be reskilled over the next 10 years. Now that's different from upskilling, where you're in your current role and you just need to learn a new skill or two to maintain relevance in existing role. I'm talking about moving from old job to new job and reskilling. And that is, and there, I could talk about this all day, but the punchline here for business leaders is that the degree and the colleges and universities, the outputs of colleges and universities are not going to be enough to upskill and reskill 1 billion people by 2030. We need new ways of identifying talent and allowing talent to come into our organizations. And that is through the concept of stacks of certifications or badges and what I term skill portfolios. Right now, job descriptions and human resources practices are heavily weighted toward the degree as the signal of workplace competency. And we need different ways to identify that and get out of this business of having job descriptions that say thou shalt have a bachelor's degree for this particular role, and instead say thou shalt have this portfolio of skills as demonstrated by the attainment of these shorter form courses or these experiential learning activities.
You think I'm kind of going off a little bit on a tangent here, but what do you think of the future of colleges and universities? I mean, we're seeing even in our area in Philadelphia, and over the last 5-10 years, a lot of mergers are happening with universities, and people are getting priced out of the education market because the average tuition is $34,000 a year at a state and school. And if you're talking about private schools, you're talking about $60,000 and up. Not that people pay that sticker price. So you being on the World Economic Forum committee, what's your take on where universities and college degrees, and are we going to see a reduction? Because there's 5,000 universities, I think, in the United States. Are we going to see 10 years from now that there's only 3,000?
Yeah, Mark, so there, by last count I saw, there are 4,400-ish higher education institutions in the United States alone. My boss, Andy Rosen, wrote a book 11 years ago called change.edu. And in that book, he predicted the consolidations of higher education institutions that you're seeing today. That the environment of your local college and university being more like a resort, or with awesome dorms and climbing walls and lazy rivers and all of that stuff, that to attract students, that is unsustainable. Because my other Kaplan friend, Brandon Bastide, he writes about this topic all the time. And I believe that you're about right on that. By the early 2030s, we'll have closer to 3,000 higher education institutions in the United States, and we will see a rise in what are called non-degree credentials that are awarded by major companies. And you're already seeing this happen with Adobe, with Microsoft, with Google, and Amazon are already starting to mint credentials for certain skill, for what I termed skill portfolios previously. And so we've got a lot of work to do because just over the last few years, that pool of non-degree credentials and badges has exploded to almost 1 million non-degree credentials here in the United States. And these are everything from, those little LinkedIn badges that you see and other badges that aren't validated. They don't contain currency within the hiring process of organizations. So to specifically answer your question, the college and university is here to stay. They're going to be around for a long time. They will be relevant. But right alongside that, as a pathway to good paying jobs, we need validated micro-credentials that are stackable like Lego bricks that either lead to a degree or and that might be a nice to have, but definitely lead to jobs and lead to upskilling and reskilling within those companies that accept those credentials. So yeah, and that's another topic, Mark, that we could talk about for at least an hour.
Yeah, it might be that we get down to like 120 schools that are all Division I football and basketball schools, because at the end of the day, without your sports teams, at least in the US, because if you go to school, and I've taught in other countries, there's not the close tie to universities that we see here, which is based a lot on the sports scene of any college. One of the questions we have from the audience is, will online learning replace them? I heard a neuroscientist say that regarding education and brains, that students should be allowed to learn what they want and what is relevant to them.
Yeah, so I believe strongly that we're moving much more into a hybrid environment where online learning is going to be an essential part of the educational process. This has already started in earnest. If you go to college today, your professor in Economics 101 has all of his or her lectures posted onto YouTube or some internal video platform. You can stay in your dorm and watch the lecture, but the thing that online learning only does not do is it is very difficult for gaining experience and the experiential learning that is essential to building skill and capability. If I just put you into an online only environment and ask you to write papers all day to somehow prove that you know something, that paper does not mean that you know how to actually do that thing in the world of work. So I believe very strongly that we're entering a new phase of the educational environment where you're going to see much more cooperation and collaboration between educational institutions and businesses to either provide more experiential opportunities when you're talking about a learn to work path into the job market, or alternatively, you're going to see many more work to learn pathways into jobs, where work to learn means that a business is hiring school leavers or high school graduates or maybe 1 year of community college, and then taking those individuals in as apprentices or paid interns. Unpaid internships should not be part of our society anymore, but paid internships and apprenticeships where you're on the job, you're being mentored, you're learning on the job, and ultimately the degree and the credential comes after a period of work with that business. So that work to learn pathway is very much congruent with the non-degree credentials that I talked about before, but you're going to see that connectivity with businesses. So you get this hybrid of the online, which is awesome for certain applications, and then the experience that you need to really show that you know how to do something.
Drexel University has done a very good job of that, because here in Philadelphia, and I've taught there, they have essentially a 5-year program. In 1 year, you get paid internship, and like 98% of the students end up with a full-time job, and almost 90% of them with the company that they interned with. And so they learn all those skills. And I kind of think that they're going to end up blowing up the university, at least in the business schools. That's where I've taught at lots of schools. I taught 10 years at Wharton. And I found that a lot of the schools don't encourage the business professors to keep working in the field. And so what they teach the kids is irrelevant to what's really happening out there. And that's sad. The under 35 generations become very reliant on technology to communicate instead of words. You wrote about 3 rules regarding one-way email communication. What are they, and how do you get young leaders to be less reliant on email and text messages? Because they could be standing right next to you and they're not talking to you. And even when they're working in the same room together, they're texting as opposed to having conversation.
Yeah, well, the future world of work is all about human interaction and human connection. And one of the dangers of digital natives, of which my sons are early in the digital native category, is that you communicate via emojis, and everything is a one-way communication. What you're missing there is the nuance of the physical interaction, either over video or even the inflection of the voice in a telephone conversation. So in my book, I've got this small section called "Email is the Worst." The original title for that was "Email is the Devil." My publisher wanted me to change that, but email is very dangerous because I gain a great deal. I have a great deal of courage when I'm sitting at my computer by myself, typing out an email to Mark about what a crappy job he did on XYZ product. And it's really easy for me to talk at you through digital communication devices instead of talking with you about how to get better. We see this with internet trolls, this kind of one-way communication, which is, I believe, very dangerous. So rule number 1, pick up the phone. Rule number 2, do a cooling off period. Even if you have to write that email, write it, put it in the can for 24 hours, come back to it and look at it again and say, would you really have written all of that if you were sitting face to face to that individual? And then obviously rule number 3 is to be checking yourself for tone and for kind of hidden meaning in your message. So I feel very strongly about just pick up the phone, walk down in a future state where we're back in offices in a hybrid fashion, walk down the hall and actually talk to the person you're having an issue with.
Yeah, I even had a neuroscientist on and said that people lost 22% of their brain capacity during this lockdown without the interaction of without the human interaction in person. And I believe that because we all stimulate each other. Here's my last question for you. If there was one thing you learned from your past that impacted your future in a positive way, what was it, and what could the audience learn from it? It's like your Miss America question.
Yeah. So I would just tell and this comes out in the book, but I am divorced and remarried to the same lady. And that was
He's a glutton for punishment.
Well, it is a true love story. It's a very unique story, but it was completely avoidable. Yes, there are some people that just aren't compatible and they don't belong together, but I did not work hard enough on myself early enough in my career to really understand what made me tick and what I needed out of relationship and my relationship with work, that I got wildly unbalanced. And had I worked on myself a bit more earlier in my career understood my personality a bit more, we may have had a different result. So it's my message here, to be clear, is that therapy is not a bad thing. And we talk down at people that have experienced and gone through therapy, and we got to stop that, because, working on yourself is a really, really good thing, and we need to promote it more.
If it was good enough for Tony Soprano, it's good enough for the rest of us.
There you go.
Andy, thank you so much for being on with us today. And it's a great book. I hope people will come out and get your book, and keep doing great work. And especially now knowing that you're at the involved with the World Economic Conference, and I think that's great. So have a great weekend, everybody. Have a safe weekend. Hope to see you all next Friday. Take care.